Huntington's disease, or HD, has been described as having motor neuron disease, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's all at once. It is a disorder that causes the neurons or nerve cells within the brain to break down and die. HD is an inherited disorder. It is passed from one parent to child through a mutation or change in a particular gene. When a parent has the HD chromosome, each child has a 50% chance of inheriting a copy of the chromosome 4 that carries the HD mutation. If a child does not inherit the HD mutation, he or she will not develop the disease and cannot pass it on to future generations. When Huntington's disease occurs without a family history, it is called sporadic HD. Symptomatic Huntington's disease, meaning once symptoms make an appearance, HD is diagnosed, predominantly when an individual carrying the mutated gene reaches young to middle-aged adulthood. Juvenile Huntington's disease, which is very rare and occurs when a child or adolescent under the age of 20 develops the symptoms of Huntington's disease. JHD accounts for 5 to 10% of all known cases, and in most of these cases the mutated gene has been passed down from the father. Huntington's disease affects the basal ganglia, which is located deep within the brain at its base, and is responsible for initiating and controlling voluntary movement. Cognition or thinking skills, affecting how a person moves on from one thought process or task to the next. It also affects a person's ability to regulate emotional responses according to their environment. It can also affect spatial awareness, balance, and coordination. This is because neurons or the nerve cells are slowly dying, causing a blockage in the two pathways between the basal ganglia and other structures within the brain. The frontal lobe is one of those structures and is located at the front of the brain, and it is important for our primary motor function or voluntary muscle control. It is also important for communication and problem solving, memory, language, along with judgment and social interactions, primarily meaning that it controls how we make social decisions, knowing when to do things and suppress impulses. As there has been no single study to reflect the prevalence of Huntington's disease in Australia, Monash University have started the first nationwide registry to map people with HD in 2022. Their gap analysis report in 2020 tells us that through available published evidence, there is 8.4% out of every 100,000 Australians have been diagnosed with HD. This would mean that in 2020, with the population of 25.7 million people, there would be just over 2,000 individuals living with a HD diagnosis. Today, in 2023, if my math is correct and the rates of diagnosis remain the same, there would be 2,220 people living with this disease. However, these estimates are based on incomplete and old data, indicating that the current HD prevalence in Australia is unknown. Even though the Australian Bureau of Statistics collects national data, information and statistics about HD, this data is hidden within the progressive neurological disease category. Evidence does suggest that prevalence in Australia, along with Western Europe and North America, has increased over the past 50 years. It is also seen more in Caucasians than in those with an Asian background. In 2019, 833 people who had a HD diagnosis were accessing the NDIS, and 331 people were living in an aged care facility. Accurate testing and diagnosis numbers are difficult to obtain, but there is work being done to provide data about prevalence rates in each state and territory by various genetic clinics across Australia. There are three categories of HD symptoms: physical, cognitive, and emotional. Physical symptoms can include mild twitching of the fingers and toes, a lack of coordination and be prone to knocking things over, difficulties with mobility and having a jerky dance-like movements. They can also experience speech and swallowing difficulties. Some examples of cognitive symptoms are short-term memory loss, difficulties in concentrating, learning new things and making plans, and there is some rigidity in thought patterns. Lastly, we have emotional. These can be in the form of depression, which is found in around 1/3 of people with HD, mood swings, apathy, aggression, and personality changes. The impact of HD on an individual are wide and varied depending on the progression and the stage of the disease. Movement is the most noticeable and is usually the first symptom to appear. Chorea, which is defined as a movement disorder that is characterized by excessive activity of the chemical dopamine in the areas of the brain that control movement, the basal ganglia and the frontal lobe. It displays a sudden, unintentional, and uncontrollable jerky movements of facial muscles and limbs. Symptoms of chorea can affect a person's daily life activities such as eating, personal care, writing, and driving. These symptoms can be managed with medications such as zenzaine, along with occupational and physical therapy. Precautions such as non-slip mats and handrails in the bathroom can also help prevent falls. Issues with movement can also affect an individual's sex life, and that they, in conjunction with their partner, need to be very creative to find a position that works for them and other ways of sharing intimacy. Individuals with Huntington's disease will find it difficult and challenging to remember the context of conversations or things they have watched or read in a book. Navigation can also be an issue and could cause them to get lost in familiar, routinely visited places. It also affects the individual's ability to make decisions, plan, and process complex topics. Long-term memory and the ability to recognize people, objects, colors, letters, and numbers are usually retained. They are often able to carry out jobs that they have previously done for many years. People with HD may display changes in their voice, which would more likely be in the form of change in the tone and quality of speech. Their speech may become hoarse or slurred, which is due to the diminishing control over the muscles in their throat. Speech therapy, along with communication aids such as tablets, maps, and charts, can be a visual reminder of how to communicate. Disinhibited behaviours are also familiar in a person living with HD, ranging from speaking out of turn or context to inappropriate sexual overtures. Other personality changes could be in the form of agitation, irritability, and aggression. Some people may experience hallucinations and delusions, which can have a severe impact on their daily lives. Feelings of anxiety, depression, and apathy can also be experienced. These could be caused by the actual diagnosis or develop over time as the disease progresses within the brain. All of these symptoms can be treated with counselling, psychotherapy, and medication such as antidepressants and antipsychotics. Living with Huntington's disease increases a person's energy needs due to their constant movement. Special diets with a high calorie intake ensure the person stays adequately nourished. As the control of the throat muscles diminish, swallowing difficulties can also become an issue and will worsen as the disease progresses. Softer foods of varying textures and consistency may need to be introduced to reduce the risk of choking as the disease advances. Tube or peg feeding may become necessary. It is important not to overlook the dental health in people as a diet high in calories are quite often high in sugar, and hand-eye coordination may make regular thorough dental hygiene difficult. There are many social impacts on the individual living with Huntington's disease. There is social isolation and discrimination due to a lack of understanding. There is loss of independence and self-esteem, relationships, friends, or family. And as the disease progresses, it may become difficult to perform tasks at work, and therefore the loss of employment and a stable income can put pressure on the individual and family as they worry about daily expenses such as utilities and food, along with the concern of losing their home if they cannot pay the mortgage or rent. Living independently can also become a concern, as some ADLs may become impossible to complete without assistance, leaving a family member to assume the role of carer, which in turn can lead to carer burnout, as the primary carer is at times responsible for other younger members of the family. And finally, I'll leave you with this, as stated by Huntington's Victoria. Due to a lack of overall community knowledge, individuals with Huntington's disease may experience discrimination, lack of understanding, and social isolation. This can lead to feelings of loneliness, depression, and anxiety, as well as limited opportunities for social engagement and participation in activities. Advocacy efforts, support groups, and educational initiatives are important for increasing awareness, fostering understanding, and providing a network of support for those affected by Huntington's disease. Thank you for watching. I hope you have learnt something and this has increased your awareness for a terrible, debilitating disease.